Hi guys, so this video is going to be discussing the Spanish-American War. But first I want to start off by having you think of something that you're proud of. What are you really proud of? Is it your grades? Is it your athletic achievements? Okay, really think about something that you're proud of. And then I want you to think about when having pride over something or about something, when can that be beneficial? A lot of times when we're proud of something, we gain a lot of confidence, for example, or our self-esteem really goes up. That is something that would be beneficial with pride, right? It gives us the self-confidence to keep going on that hard math subject, or gives us confidence after winning a game, right? And taking that confidence and carrying it over to the next game. That's when pride can be beneficial. When can pride be destructive? Pride can be destructive when people are over bragging, right? Or excessively talking about their achievements, okay, making others feel bad. And really the big thing with pride and when it can be destructive is when we only focus on one achievement and forget that we have to keep moving, we have to keep growing. Sometimes we can be blinded by our own pride, right, and unable to grow from that experience, right, and get better because we already think we are the best and we cannot move up, right? So this introduction, we're just discussing patriotism versus nationalism. Please do not write everything on this slide down if you're following along. It's kind of unfocusing and focusing, sorry about that. So just really quick, patriotism is the love someone feels for their country that is based on the idea that this country itself is good and that good people live here, versus nationalism is also the love and affection for one's country, but it's based on the idea that this particular country is better than all the rest. Do we see the negative disconnect there? Patriotism is saying that the country is good and that good people live there, right? But nationalism is saying the country is good or better because it is just better than all the rest, okay? And if that's a little confusing for you, I have some comics in the next slides that will illustrate that. So we have patriotism versus nationalism. Patriotism, I'm going to work on my house because it's the best house. Versus nationalism, my house is the best house because it's my house. We see up top here, this guy is really willing to work on their house because they want to make it the best house that it can be, right? That means fixing the roof if it's damaged, right? Fixing different things around the house to make it the best house, okay? Whereas this guy doesn't want to fix anything because it's already, in his opinion, the best house, okay? That is patriotism versus nationalism. Here's another one. Patriotism, learning from history. We have this book on the Civil War, learning and acknowledging history, versus nationalism, reinventing history, okay? This guy's saying people liked being slaves. So patriotism is going back within our history books and learning the good stuff, but also the bad stuff, right? Acknowledging that slavery was a huge institution in this country. It was a part of this country's history. Versus nationalism, reinventing, twisting that history around to fit this like pro-American toxic narrative. We saw reinventing history with the Daughters of the Confederacy, changing textbooks to fit that pro-Southern narrative, right? Saying slavery wasn't the cause of the Civil War, or slavery wasn't as bad as people said, okay? So this is where we see nationalism and patriotism comparing and contrasting again. Another one, this one's really, really powerful, I think. Patriotism, pride in who you are, versus nationalism, pride in who you aren't. We see here that America, right, showing that America is made up of many different people from many different backgrounds, right? We don't all look the same, and we don't all celebrate or have the same values, right? Versus nationalism, this white guy having this idea that only white people exist in the United States and pushing out any persons of color, anybody right? That looks different from that. So a lot of the times we see nationalists telling American citizens, asking them, hey, where are you from? Go back, telling them to go back to their country, right? But really, they belong here just as much as this guy does, okay? So here we see toxic nationalism, and we've seen a lot of that recently too, but I just wanted to have the differentiation of patriotism versus nationalism, because I think it's pretty important. Okay, now we get into another ism, imperialism. Okay, imperialism is extending a country's power through diplomacy or military force. Diplomacy, this might be a new word for you, is basically we have diplomats or ambassadors going over to other countries, right, and developing a relationship with them. Okay, that is diplomacy. Why would we want to develop a relationship with other countries? For trade, allies, right, if there's ever a war, okay? Just things like that, okay? But imperialism is extending a country's power through diplomacy or military force. This is expanding a country, so taking the country and expanding it by conquering different territories, right, or different countries around the world, so that you can expand your influence, right, expand power. Okay? And most of the time when we do this, it's to benefit our the country itself, right, through trade, getting money, getting goods, right? So an example would be the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire was able to expand its empire around the world, right? They had access to different trade routes that way. And the downfall is that the more you conquer, yes, the more land you get, but the more people that you have to try and control, okay? And that was Rome's downfall. To quote Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility, right? So with great power becomes great responsibility to try and govern these people in the way that you want, and it just wasn't possible in the outer reaches of their empire because they were independent, right? They were more independent out there because they were farther away from the hub of the government. Okay, so they were more likely to try and gain independence. Here we see an example of the Spanish Empire in the 1790s, right? We see a lot, okay? They have gained a lot of ground versus the end of the 18th century, where it's shrunk, like, by a lot, okay? And we'll talk more about the Spanish Empire because we're talking about the Spanish-American War today. But just look at the, like, huge changes, okay, from the 1790s to the 1898, okay? Crazy. So, Cuban rebellion against Spain. This is where the Spanish-American War kind of slowly starts to snowball, right? The Cubans are rebelling against the Spanish, right? Spain is trying to control Cuba in many different ways. This guy, Valeriano Weyler Nicolau, okay, he's also known as the Butcher. During these rebellions, he would throw Cubans into concentration camp-like things, right? We know from context clues the nickname the Butcher. He's not a great guy, okay? So if you get anything from this slide, just know that Cubans are rebelling against Spain. Okay, they're trying to gain their independence and be their own country. We saw that, we've seen that throughout history in many different ways. For example, our country, right, trying to separate ourselves from Britain. Okay, so this story is similar. So here are some steps that started the Spanish-American War. The first one, the Delome letter. Okay, this was stolen by a Cuban rebel and found its way to American forces. It was written by Spanish official Enrique Dupuy de Lome. Basically what he was doing was bad-mouthing President McKinley. He said McKinley is a low politician, weak and catering to the rabble meaning the rebels. Okay, he bad-mouths McKinley, and the United States is like, you don't do that. Only we can do that. It's only funny when we make fun of McKinley. So this starts to snowball right into the Spanish-American War. And McKinley's all, catch me outside, how about that? They're not going to stand for this, right? The next one is the sinking of the USS Maine. This ship, this United States ship, blows up. People aren't sure what happened. It leaves 250 dead. They blame Spain, but there's no evidence to say they actually did it. Somebody in class told me yesterday that they learned about this and they said maybe it was a mechanical failure. Okay, so it could have been like nobody's fault. But the headlines, the newspaper headlines, start to kind of speculate that that Spain blew up this ship. Okay, so that starts some unnecessary, some of the tension with Spain. Okay, with the blowing up of the ship. The next step: strategic trade in the Philippines. To gain control in the Philippines would give access to a lot more Asian countries down here. It would be almost a gateway to trade. Okay, so we wanted control of the Philippines. Step 4, McKinley's war message. Okay, he wrote this long war message saying why they should go to war. Okay, I've broken it down into 4 easy steps. Okay, people were he was saying, for humanity, we need to go to war with Spain for humanity. We need to stop the bloodshed in Cuba. We need to help Cuba gain protection. We need peace. And then also he's like, this is disrupting our trade and business. We kind of need to fix that. But also peace. You know, it's always like covering up the real reason why we're going to war, right? Which is money for us, right? What's in it for us is the question America always seems to ask, okay? So these are the reasons why we're going to war, according to McKinley. The media, yellow journalism, extremely exaggerated journalism, very problematic. We have headlines after that USS Maine blew up. It says, destruction of the warship Maine was the work of an enemy. If you're just reading that headline, you're thinking, okay, Spain did it, right? But really, in smaller letters down here, right, in the smaller font, $50,000 reward for the detection of the perpetrator of the Maine outrage. So they're asking for evidence. They don't know that it was Spain, right? They don't have proof, but this makes it seem like it was. This one is very interesting as well, this headline. Crisis at hand, Spanish treachery. If you were to only read the big letters, that's what you would read. You would be like, oh my gosh, Spain, we hate them. But what it says is crisis at hand is at hand. 253 known to be lost. Cabinet in session, growing belief in Delome and panic. Please. Spanish treachery. Okay? So there's smaller letters here that kind of tell the real story, but if you were to only read the headline, okay, or the newspaper boys on the corner reading the headline, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, hate Spain. Okay? So this is just one part of the media. Another part of the media is Thomas Edison actually reenacts the war through moving pictures, right? Through kind of movies, right? We saw in the Civil War that the pictures of the dead bodies were very, very powerful in getting people to support the war, right? So Thomas Edison reenacts the war through moving pictures to kind of exhibit that that feeling of wanting to either join or support the war. Okay, get people riled up. These are some pictures from the moving pictures. Okay. I don't know if that one was there. Okay. The last one, pride. Okay, it all comes back to this idea of pride. We have 2 countries here. One that has expanded pretty successfully, and the United States who hasn't really yet. Okay, so I use this analogy of Super Weenie Junior versus the Salty Spittoon. Okay, America wants to be the tough, right? The tough, like Spain, expanding their country, right? Expanding their power, just like Spain has. Okay, they don't want to be in Super Weenie Junior. They want to be in the Salty Spittoon with Spain. Okay. Here we're getting to Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt, you should know, was a very sick child and really tried to make up for that by trying to be a manly man in his later years, right? In his adulthood, because he didn't want to be seen as weak. Okay, and one of the ways that we see this is him forming the Rough Riders, which is the first U.S. volunteer cavalry. That's his group right here. He basically went around and went to cowboys, his old Harvard buddies, his old Ivy League buddies, and was like, hey, do you want to join my cavalry? We can go and ride horses and fight, man stuff. So they join, and he gets a pretty large group. But the problem is when he goes to fight, they actually have to get on a boat to go to Cuba. And they have to leave a lot of their horses behind. And the horses that they do take, they try and make swim, and most of them make it to shore, but not all of them. Okay, so they're already at a low, right? Because they had fought for months to trained on horseback to fight. Okay, so they're already down here. But here we have the Buffalo Soldiers. This is an all-black cavalry and infantry regiment. They were really respected by Native American tribes. They were just a really good group of soldiers. Okay, not really well known. Okay, and we'll see in a minute why. But it was an all-black cavalry called the Buffalo Soldiers. And they come into play in the Battle of San Juan Hill. Okay? The Buffalo Soldiers actually go and fight most of the battle. And when it's like close to being done, Teddy Roosevelt shows up with his buddies. And like I said earlier, transporting the horses did not work out well. Okay? So they're already not doing too hot. And so because they come in at the end, the Buffalo Soldiers, these guys had done most of the fighting, done most of the work. And so Teddy Roosevelt and his men just kind of slide in, and they're there at the end, they win, okay? And the Rough Riders end up taking all the credit away from the Buffalo Soldiers, which is really, really sad. But the Buffalo Soldiers did most of the work. It's like if you're doing a group project and you do most of the work, and the day before it's due, one person puts their name on the paper and they're like, yep, I did this all. Like, that's a smaller scale. Can you imagine fighting the whole battle and then somebody's slipping in at the end being like, okay, I did it, you're welcome, I helped you. Anyway. The next battle, Manila Bay battle, 14,000 men, or 14,000, 1,400 men are sent to the Philippines. This is where we see a major weakness with Spain, okay? They have 8 ships, but they're all wooden, okay? Versus 7 steel ships, okay? That we have. So we've already won before we even started, okay? That is just a way we are kind of one-upping Spain in that aspect, is our 7 steel ships versus their 8 wooden ships in the Manila Bay battle. Just really quick, what do you think this war's biggest killer was? We've seen this before. It was disease, okay? A lot of people dying from disease. That was the biggest killer. Biggest disease, most popular, was yellow fever. Here's some of the symptoms. Nausea and vomiting, severe cases included high fever, bleeding, and shock, okay? Yellow discoloration of the skin and the whites of the eyes, so you're like around the white of your eyes would turn yellow, and then your skin would also have that yellow coloring. That's why they called it yellow fever. So that is the disease of the year. The legacy. Philippines eventually would not gain their independence until 1946. Cuba had no foreign agreements, and the United States kind of swooped in. Even though they gained their independence, the United States kind of swoops in and says they're unfit for self-government, and kind of lets them, Cubans kind of have to let the United States intervene whenever they want because of this. Okay, Puerto Rico, the United States remains in the military control and slowly start to gain power. And then we also get Hawaii out of this. So with all the destruction and terribleness, we get Hawaii. So yay for us. Okay, sandy beaches. Alright, that is it, and we will see you in the next video.